Love on the School Bus by Mark Spruce. Part 2. The story continues. To be honest, a complete lack of courage was my biggest handicap to actually meeting Stephanie. There was no way I was brave enough just to walk down to her house, face her fearsome father at the doorstep and ask her out. Luck would have to intervene whilst I procrastinated on the sidelines and distracted myself with listening to Genesis. Fate struck a few days later, after the Dave and Michelle marathon snogging episode. One Friday evening, Stephanie walked in through the door of our village youth club. The village hall was open for youth club every Friday from 6:30 p.m. until 10 p.m. An early 1950s single-storey building with a high-pitched roof, pebble-dashed walls and metal-framed windows. Inside, on a worn wooden floor, stood a scattered arrangement of old chairs made of metal tubing with faded green canvas covers from which the frayed ends hung limply. The walls were decorated with large amateur paintings created by a local artist some years before of village scenes through history. Their heavy wooden frames were screwed to the walls, and several had been damaged over the years with tears and scratches. At the end of the hall, furthest from the door, snooker and table tennis tables had been erected, where fiercely competitive tournaments would take place. Local girls of various ages would generally sit in groups at one end of the hall, whilst the boys monopolised the table tennis and snooker tables at the other end. Occasionally, a group of girls would saunter over to put a single on the battered Decca record player halfway up the hall. They would all turn to face the record player, watching the disc rotate whilst protecting its exposed surface from the odd stray table tennis ball that clattered towards it. The record player's volume would be gradually increased by the girls to speaker-distorting volume before being turned down again by the youth club organiser to a chorus of complaints. The organiser would walk away, and so the game of volume increasing would start again. It was a very small world. I was standing with a couple of friends next to the snooker table at the far end of the hall when Stephanie first walked in. It was chance that I had looked up at that moment and seen her, along with one sister, standing in the doorway surveying the scene. My heart rate quickened immediately. I felt my throat tighten. Should I just stare at her inanely, or should I go over and say hello? This was completely uncharted territory for me. The art of seduction. What a joke that was. God, what on earth should I do? Thankfully, I didn't have to do anything. Stephanie and her sister walked into the hall and joined the group of girls by the record player. She glanced briefly in my direction and smiled before picking up a stack of singles and flicking through them with her back to me. She'd seen me, but now what should I do? None of my friends had noticed her at this time, or at least none had made any comment. Did I have the courage to walk over to her and say hello in front of all those other girls? Of course I didn't. This was agony, but if in doubt, do nothing, I thought. Then I was struck with teenage inspiration. I will impress her with my table tennis skills. Luckily, a couple of younger boys were on the table at that moment. In the time-honoured hierarchy of the pecking order, I quickly booted them off the table and got my friend Tony to join me in a game. Now don't mess this up, I thought to myself. Play as well as you know you can, and she's bound to be impressed. The table tennis bat became my adolescent equivalent of cruising past in a soft-top Ferrari. This could not fail. Unfortunately, I'd not explained my wooing tactic to Tony, who proceeded to play at the top of his game and knock balls past me at an appalling rate. Luckily, one of Tony's looping smashes turned out to be my introduction. The ball sailed past my ear and hit Stephanie square on the back. She turned quickly, picking up the ball that had fallen at her feet, and held it out towards me, smiling shyly. Several weeks after first seeing her from the back of a pony, I found myself taking those final few steps towards her. No coach glass window separated us now. No mocking friends were at my shoulder. This was it at last. "Thanks," I mumbled and smiled, taking the ball from her. "Would you like a game?" The words had just tumbled out of my mouth without thinking. I'm sure if I'd thought about it, I would have just awkwardly returned to the game with Tony, silently cursing my own cowardice. But I'd said it. I had actually talked to her. Thankfully, she quickly agreed, and I got rid of Tony without any argument. Playing table tennis was a great icebreaker. Even I had enough common sense to realise you don't play your hardest with side spins and smashes against a girl you want to continue talking to. I eased off my game and Stephanie played quite well. For a girl. I could feel my mate's eyes boring into the back of my head as I played the game, but unlike the previous weeks on the coach, no one now dared ridicule me. I just knew they were insanely jealous. They must be, I thought. She's wonderful. She's playing table tennis with me, and I have just quietly moved ever so slightly up the pecking order. Stephanie was incredibly easy to talk to. A wonderful new world was opening up in front of me. Not that I could let it show too much in front of my mates, of course. After a while, we left the table and sat in a corner near the door talking. I've no idea what I rambled on about, but I remember she seemed so confident. I was dying to touch her. Whilst talking, I was pleased to see our intimate conversation had been noted by my friends at the far end of the hall. I even noticed one or two of the girls grouped around the record player giving us an occasional sideways glance. I cast furtive glances directly into Stephanie's eyes. I desperately wanted to kiss her, but at the same time I was terrified that my advance would be rejected and I'd blow the whole thing. I don't know if Stephanie sensed my inner turmoil, but she quietly leaned closer and whispered, "Do you want to go outside?" "Oh, thank you, I screamed, for having the confidence to say that. Luckily, the scream was only inside my head. Outwardly, I just managed a nervous grin, a nod of, okay. We walked out into the hall's entrance lobby, where our coats hung on old brass pegs. We put our coats on and walked out into the night. My mind at this point was a racing, panicking whirl. Excitement mixed with performance anxiety. There was no manual for this. I was on my own. Thank goodness Stephanie had far more confidence than I did at this point. She quickly took my hand and led me round to the dark side of the hall. This was the side that the street lamps across the road could not reach. I was being led to the dark side. Beware the force, Mark. Beware the force. Well, I think the force came on pretty strong at that moment. I leant back against the side of the hall. Stephanie lay into me, and I put my arms around her waist under her coat, pulling her towards me. Actually, I could not see a lot, being now well and truly on the dark side, but our faces drew closer and finally we kissed for the first time. I'm sure a scientist could explain in cold equations just what the rush of chemicals I experienced at that moment actually consisted of. At first, I could not rationalise it. Then, in another instant, I recognised the feeling. I was deliriously happy. The happiest I'd ever been to that point in my life. Stephanie and I said nothing. We just kissed and kissed. These were completely uncharted yet totally wonderful waters to be wading through. I've no idea how long we stayed outside in that position, snogging intently, but at some point it began to rain. The rain began to fall heavier, but neither of us took any notice. We just held on tighter, lips locked in awakened teenage passion. At a subdued level, the sound of music from the record player could be clearly heard outside the hall. Whilst locked in our snogathon, I suddenly became aware of the song that was being played inside. It was David Essex singing out with impassioned voice. Hold me close, don't let me go, oh no. It was the most wonderful moment of serendipity. I smiled inwardly. Eventually, I think we both noticed we were soaked and that we really ought to go back inside. Reluctantly, we walked back and took off our wet coats. As we returned to the bright lights of the hall on a wave of euphoria, I was delighted to see all my friends looking up from around the snooker table. One of the girls commented to Stephanie that we looked like a pair of drowned rats, and another muttered knowingly, "I know what you've been doing." Briefly, my mind wandered to a thought of Dave and Michelle on the school bus. A smile crossed my face as I realised on Monday I would now be moving 2 seats further back. Spruce Casts, an eclectic collection of anecdotes, reflections and stories by Mark Spruce.